and thank you for joining us on Rogers TV. I'm Mark Sutcliffe, and welcome to our debate for the riding of Kanata-Carleton in the 2021 federal election. In just a moment, we're going to meet the 5 candidates who are here for our debate tonight. But first, I'll go over what's going to happen this evening. Every candidate will have 1 minute to provide an opening statement. We drew the order for those opening statements just before we began our telecast. After that, we will go into a series of debates about important topics in this election campaign, including for the riding of Kanata-Carleton. In each case, I'll begin by directing a question to one of the candidates. That candidate will have some time to answer that question on his or her own, and then we'll open it up to debate and participation from everyone on that topic. And then at the end of that debate segment, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was originally directed, and he or she will have some time to wrap up on that topic. Every candidate will get 1 question, and then we will wrap up with some closing statements. Once again, 60 seconds, 1 minute in length, and we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's meet the candidates who are here for our debate for Kanata-Carleton. First is the NDP candidate, Melissa Coenraad. Jenna Sudds is the Liberal candidate. Scott Miller is representing the People's Party of Canada. Jennifer McAndrew is the candidate for the Conservative Party. And finally, for the Green Party of Canada, Jennifer Purdy. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here tonight. We'll start with the opening statements, and Melissa Coenraad, you're up first. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. People are going to tell you that strategic voting is the only way to keep the Conservatives out of government. That's not true. Electing an NDP government will also keep the Conservatives out of Parliament. We have spent the last 6 years with a Liberal government that has brought forward many promises and kept none. Canadians are ready for better. We're in this election now in a pandemic because the Liberal government is ready for better. You might be wondering who I am. I'm Melissa Coenraad, and I'm the NDP candidate for Kanata-Carleton. I'm a healthcare worker, I'm a mom, and I'm an average Canadian just like you. Working as a healthcare worker through this pandemic has really brought me to the forefront of what people have been struggling with. I saw it every single day.
Okay, that's time.
Okay.
Thank you. We'll go next to Jenna Sudds, the Liberal candidate. You have 1 minute as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I've lived in Canada for 20 years, and I love it. That's why I've worked so hard to grow the community and improve opportunities for the people and the businesses here. Building Kanata has been my occupation, but also my preoccupation. I have had the honor of being elected as the City Councillor for Kanata North and served the community as Deputy Mayor. I spent 12 years working as an economist, and I was the founding president of the Kanata North Business Association and a longtime volunteer with the Kanata Food Cupboard. It's been a hard 18 months for everyone, and we have an important decision to make. The way that our country and our community grow out of this pandemic will be determined by how well we can work together and who we elect to help guide our recovery. I'm ready to continue to serve and build on the experience I've had to date. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up is the People's Party of Canada candidate, Scott Miller. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. My name is Scott Miller. I'm with the People's Party of Canada. The party was founded several years ago. Its founding principles were freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And those 4 pillars have never been more needed than they are now. We have seen an unprecedented assault on our civil liberties in this country over the last 18 months, something I would not have believed, I would not have plot in a science fiction novel would have made no sense. It's not just Canada, but we are one of the worst jurisdictions, Ontario in particular, worldwide for lockdowns. I have friends in other countries who are emailing me back, what the hell is going on in Ontario? But we're not the worst. It could be worse than we are here in Australia. People are being locked down, they're being put in concentration camps, which they call quarantine centers, involuntarily. It is literally unbelievable. And we have a unique opportunity to make a vote for our freedom. And your choice is freedom or not freedom.
All right, thank you. Next is Jennifer McAndrew, the Conservative candidate. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. You know, I've often been asked why I decided to run for office. And really, the short answer is it's not in my nature to sit around and complain about what needs to be done. So I decided to step up and take action. I know firsthand how frustrating it was for my kids to be taking virtual classes and for us to be running our business from our home in Carp with internet that was unreliable. And I want to advocate for the infrastructure and connectivity our community needs and deserves. And I can truly say I understand the struggles of small business, especially over the last 2 years, because I have lived it every single day. I know what it takes to meet payroll and to be the last to get paid because I believe it's the responsibility to take care of my team first. A priority of mine is to address the mental health and addiction crisis facing our communities. And as a board member of the Dave Smith Youth Treatment Center, I've heard way too many stories about lives cut short by addiction, and I want to champion increased access to local community services and getting the help when and where it is needed. I'm so proud to be part of our community, and I promise to champion our families, our businesses, and our local issues.
Thank you. Finally, the opening statement from Jennifer Purdy, representing the Green Party. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a leader, a physician, a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, small business owner, and I'm a farmer. I was born in Canada, and I left Canada to go to get an education, and somehow I ended up in the military. I lived and served across the country, and then in 2015, my spouse, Bill Whalen, and I were posted back to Ottawa, and we bought a farm in Dunrobin. I voluntarily released from the military in 2018, and at that time, I opened up my own small medical clinic. The timing of this election is unfortunate. There's a fourth wave. People are so anxious about sending their kids back or going back to work themselves in the schools, yet here we are. The only silver lining I can see is that this is an opportunity to reset our plans. We can see the effects of climate change. We've been seeing the effects in Kanata-Carleton with the heat, with drought, and so this is our chance to reset and take care of climate change, but also of ourselves and each other. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, candidates, for your opening statements. We're going to move now into the debate portion, and I'm going to direct a question to Melissa Coenraad of the New Democratic Party. Your leader, Jagmeet Singh, has said he's in favor of mandatory vaccinations for federal public servants. What consequences would public servants face if they were not vaccinated?
I think we have to focus on the safety of the public in public-facing environments. And I think it's the responsibility of the government to make sure that their employees are as safe as possible for when the public tries to interact with them. And I think that we have to focus on ensuring that vaccines are available to all public servants and all Canadians that are out there. We know we have some areas that are a little slower on the uptake, and I think we need to focus on education to make sure that people can make the best decision for themselves in this pandemic in getting vaccinated, and encourage every single public servant to be vaccinated.
All right, it's open to everyone on this topic now. Go ahead.
So I will speak up as a doctor because I've actually been working at the COVID assessment clinic on Moody Drive since April 2020, and in fact, I worked a full day there today. So and the Green Party is in favor of vaccinations. We want to encourage people to get vaccinated. I respect and appreciate that there's actually a legal requirement for employers to provide a safe workplace for their employees. And for that reason, I believe that people should be required to be vaccinated to access non-essential businesses and other entities. I also fully agree with the Queensway-Carleton Hospital and the Ottawa Hospital at mandating vaccines because, again, there's that legal requirement to keep people safe, their employees safe, but also patients. Nobody usually wants to go to hospital to get sick.
And for sure, we want to see that Canadians can move around again safely in a responsible way. And that means double vaccinations. And our Liberal Party has committed to a $1 billion fund that will help provinces as they move towards creating their own vaccine passports. But we have also committed to tabling legislation that will ensure businesses that require proof of vaccination for their employees or their customers can do so without the threat of facing legal challenges. So as a Liberal Party, first and foremost, safety is of most importance. And double vaccinations enable us, again, to move around safely in the community.
And yet it's interesting because the Liberals totally ducked this topic and did not want to mandate vaccines until an election was called, number one. Number two, they have politicized the whole issue of vaccines, and it's an affront, and it's making it more and more difficult for people who are hesitant to get vaccinated. This should have been left out of the realm of politics. It's a healthcare issue, it's a public health issue, it's a public health emergency. And so it is challenging and difficult to understand how the Liberals could put politics and power ahead of people's lives.
And yet, I'd contrast that when the pandemic first began, of course, the Liberal team moved very quickly to procure enough doses that Canadians could get 2 doses of the vaccine, and did so 2 months earlier so that we were able to be vaccinated in July, 2 months ahead of time. And now we're working hard on booster shots as well. So I know that we have put the safety of our Canadians front and foremost, and have done so in a responsible way.
Although actually, due to the contracts, we have not been able to see the full contracts to acquire those vaccines. It is very well known that the Liberals fumbled the ball in getting the vaccines out. Kudos to the Liberals for eventually getting the vaccines out, but the initial rollout was, of course, it was challenging. There was a lack of supply. The provinces didn't know when the next dose was going to come in. So again, the Liberals have done some things well, they've done some things poorly, but also the worst thing is they're politicizing vaccines, and it's an affront. It's an affront to public health.
The Liberals have done nothing well. They have completely fumbled every aspect of this from day one. That's why we're one of the only countries where we use mixed vaccinations that aren't accepted by much of the world. It has been a complete clown car from the beginning. But there's a fundamental issue. Benjamin Franklin said, those who give up essential liberty for safety will deserve and get neither liberty nor safety. And there is a line between making vaccines available, between encouraging vaccines, between doing the research to make sure they're out there, and mandating people take them. And this is a line we must not cross. This is a medical decision that must be left to individuals. Mandating these is completely against the principles this country was founded on.
I will never apologize for mandating double vaccines in our country.
You need triple
This is
now.
leadership. This is what is required in a pandemic that we could never have foreseen. And yes, we were able to procure enough vaccines to be able to get Canadians double vaccinated 2 months ahead of schedule, but we're approaching 80% of the Canadian population that has stood up and done what needed to be done and got both vaccines.
All right.
And we've done
make
so
sure we hear
at a
from
pace
Jennifer
faster
McAndrew
than
as well.
others.
Go ahead.
And while I highly recommend, again, that everyone is vaccinated, I think that what we're treading on here is a person's right to choose what is best for their own health care. Absolutely. I am double vaccinated. You know, we encourage all of our campaign volunteers, but we're not mandating. It's up to them. It's their choice at the end of the day. And we've taken all necessary precautions to be safe, and we trust that adults can be accountable for their actions. But again, it's a person's right to choose what is in their best interest for their health, for them and their family.
And so what about our children, our kids under 12 who haven't been able to be vaccinated yet? I know I have a daughter who's 10. I send her off to school next week. I need to have confidence that the adults that are around her and the people that are within her school and as we're out about in the community have done what they needed to do, have stood up and got both of their vaccines. And I'm sorry, but I won't apologize for the fact that this is what we need to do as Canadians. And I'm very proud of the 80% of Canadians who have done so already, and encourage the rest to do so as well.
You keep saying double vaccines. We're up to 3 now that's coming. And Pfizer has promised a 4th before the end of the year focused on Delta. There's a reason why there's never been a successful vaccine against the coronavirus in the past. Maybe this time will work, maybe the sequence, but we're up to 4 now.
Actually,
and there's no
Scott,
end in sight.
I need to correct you. The vaccines have, in fact, been quite successful. The people in the ICU these days for COVID are those who are unvaccinated or partially vaccinated. Please get both vaccines.
All
Thank
right,
you.
that is time. We're going to go back to Melissa Coenraad. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic. Go ahead.
Thank you. The NDP has made it very clear that people need to get vaccinated. I work in a hospital. I got vaccinated as soon as possible. I have a 12-year-old son who got vaccinated as soon as possible. I think it is our responsibility as frontline workers, healthcare workers, teachers, government workers to get vaccinated for those we were taking care of. And I am in favor of everyone getting this vaccine in order to be patient-facing and
Okay.
public-facing.
All right, thank you. Let's move to the next question now, which I'll address to the Liberal candidate, Jenna Sudds. We're into a fourth wave of the pandemic now, and there is a crisis, a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. Why did the Prime Minister ask for an election when he had 2 years left in his mandate, and there were still a lot of issues to address?
Well, first of all, I'd like to start by offering my sincere condolences, of course, to the loved ones, those who have lost their lives in the terrorist attack in Kabul. I know everyone has heard our allies in unison talk how quickly and unexpectedly the events took place. Having said that, we are in an unprecedented time in our country, and it is Canadians' right to be able to have a say in how we recover and how we move forward as a country. And this election is just that. It's a choice and it's an opportunity to chart our path forward post-pandemic.
It's open to everyone now on this topic. Go ahead.
So we did not need an election at this time to move forward. The other parties made it very clear that they wanted to work with Mr. Trudeau, Prime Minister Trudeau at the time. In fact, in the spring, as late as April 2020, when we were in the third wave, Trudeau was quoted as saying basically that, no, we don't want an election. But then the tea leaves changed. We came out of that third wave and they thought, gosh darn it, it'd be a good idea to have an election. Now, he knew going in to meet with the Governor General that Kabul was falling. I am not an Afghan vet. I did not serve there, but I've treated a lot of people when I was in Petawawa who had, and I know a lot of people who've served there and have left a part of them in Afghanistan. If it was any other country that had fallen, then you could argue that what he did was the right move. It was not a good move to call an election in the first place with the fourth wave, but here we are. But the fact that it was Afghanistan, where there had been promises made and people had formed such tight kinships and bonds with people and interpreters, and it's not just the military, public servants, journalists, diplomats, they had all formed close bonds. So I think this was a catastrophic error, as we have seen. The government was also very slow in getting things going, and from what I understand, it was bureaucracy that has slowed the process down catastrophically and tragically for many Afghan and Afghan Canadians.
I
don't
we
think
have
you
to
can blame the
also-
Prime Minister. I don't think you can blame him. It's not really his fault. He's an empty head and an empty suit who just reads the scripts he's given and looks for an excuse to reach in his tickle trunk and put on a costume.
Well,
Yes, get the camera on me, thank you. It's not his fault, it's the people behind him. The reason this is here because they cynically looked, they thought they could get an advantage, they looked for a moment to strike, and it's not working out so well. But there's no good reason for this. I have to agree with everybody here, except maybe Jenna. It's a cynical ploy, and I hope it'll backfire on him.
I think, too, in calling this election, we're really just perpetuating the capacity for coronavirus to spread from home to home. We're asking people to come out of their homes. We're asking immunocompromised people, people who are unable medically to get the vaccine, to very possibly have to come out to vote if they can't get their mail-in ballot in time. We're also spending $610 million on this election that we could be spending on recovery, that we could be spending on healthcare because our hospitals have been over capacity, that we could be spending on mental health resources, as we know that mental health in this country, especially amongst our healthcare workers and our children, is at an all-time high. CHEO is overrun with patients, and yet here we are spending $610 million on an election that nobody in Canada wanted except for this Liberal government, and I think it's shameful.
We've been outdoor knocking, and similar to everyone else, and everyone's asking, why are we having this election? Constituents in Kanata-Carleton are upset. They're angry about this. They want to go back to their lives. They want to go back to school. They want to get things back to normal. They want to be able to afford things. And this election has just polarized people. They do not want it. And now we're forced into this situation, and we're all here because of that. So it's not getting the response at the door from the people we're talking to as we're door knocking.
Everything on offer by the Liberal government are things that could have been accomplished with the willing assistance of the other parties. And instead they decided to go to an election. And it's offensive. As a doctor at the COVID assessment clinic on Moody Drive, I've told people you have to stay home for 10 days or 14 days, depending on what was going on in their particular case. Sick leave apparently was not a federal issue last fall and last Christmas, and they had this sick recovery benefit which had gaps in it, so they fixed it and kept the gaps right there and didn't fix it. So I've had to tell people, even right before Christmas with kids, that yeah, they would have to stay home, they would have no pay because you're unpaid contractors if they stayed home, and it's offensive. It should be about people, not about politics and lives.
And this is exactly about people. This is about giving people choice. I wholeheartedly agree. It has been a very tough 18 months for individuals, for families, for businesses. And as we chart our path forward, we want to hear what Canadians have to say. We're listening. We're at the doors. And it is now an opportunity for the Canadian public to decide who they want to lead us forward. I wholeheartedly believe that our Liberal government has been there for us like none other. These last 18 months, rolling out programs to make sure that we got through this pandemic whole. And we're faring well as a country. And now we have the opportunity to decide if we want that leadership to continue.
And so,
and
Jenna,
I believe we do.
Jenna, I'm supposing that you haven't spoken to many small business owners, have you?
False.
Or people who didn't, well, I'm a small business owner, and
I am too.
I did not qualify for any assistance. I spoke to West Carleton Online in the spring, and I was saying, if money doesn't start coming in soon, I'll be closing my practice in September. And then, unfortunately, I started to work at the COVID assessment clinic. But that's, and I was one of the fortunate ones. Many small businesses have closed because of the ridiculous gaps in the support measures offered by the Liberal Party, while they enriched their friends with some of the programs out there. It does not make sense. So I agree. People should be making their choice, but move away from craven politics to a party that offers choice, and to an individual who offers choice, an unwhipped vote, truly representing the constituents, and not a party or rich corporate elitists and that sort of thing.
Well, and on top of that, Canada is not recovering well. We are not recovering quickly, and this is not the path forward. We're one of the worst in the G7, if not the worst.
Okay, we'll actually come to that with our next question, but before we do that, Jenna Sudds, I'll go back to you. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic.
Terrific, thank you. Again, ultimately this election comes down to choice. The last time a mandate was received through an election, COVID-19 and this pandemic were not even on the horizon. We didn't know what we didn't know. So some may try to tell you that you do not deserve a voice in how Canada should reemerge through the final stages of the pandemic, but I disagree, and you do have a right to that choice.
All right, thank you. Let's go to our next question now, which I'll address to Scott Miller from the People's Party of Canada. What is your economic plan for recovering from the pandemic, and how would you address the extraordinary cost that the pandemic has had on government finances, the debt that we have accumulated over the last 18 months? Go ahead, 45 seconds.
That is really an excellent question, because I have no idea. During the last election, 2019, we were running $30 billion deficits, and that would be a $30 billion deficit is a very difficult thing to address without causing a lot of pain. Now we've run 2 years in a row where the deficits are 10 times that. The $80 billion they handed out to citizens directly through CERB is the least they could do for shutting down the economy, for throwing people out of work. That's not the $80 billion I wonder about. It's the other $600 or $700 billion that's gone missing. I would really like to know where. And practically speaking, I don't see any reasonable way to get out of that. Ultimately, it's going to be defaulted one way or another. We're not the only country that's going to happen to, but we can't save our way out of that.
All right, it's open to everyone now on economic recovery and the government finances.
I think one of the main things that we need to look at moving forward is that, like you said, this is not going to be a fast food fix. It's not going to be an instantaneous process. We need to look beyond 4 months. We need to look at 4 years. We need to look at 10 years from now, and that's part of the Conservative plan to get the government's spending under control, which is the biggest thing. We're spending beyond our means. As a small business owner, as I'm sure we all know, our business would have folded years ago if this was the position. If we were spending to this level, once we get that in control, we can actually look at balancing the budget and being able to support all the programs that we need to for this country to regain its strength.
I think part of the economic recovery is definitely going to be to make sure that the wealthiest in Canada pay their fair share. From March 2020 to now, the wealthiest Canadians grew by $78 billion, while the rest of us stayed at home and suffered. Dividends were paid to shareholders and CEOs of long-term care homes, while thousands of people in those homes died because of lack of PPE and care in those homes, lack of staff, and just repeated cuts to health care, which left them in a situation where they just couldn't manage. So I think that in having the wealthiest pay their fair share, we can increase our healthcare. We can have pharmacare that's cost neutral, that will just help Canadians save that money, that $555 roughly a year that they can put back in their pocket. We need to have affordable housing. It's not any one fix. We have affordable housing. People save more money. They can pay less than 30% of their income towards their housing. People are currently still being kicked out of rental units, losing their homes because they still can't pay. There are 10 times the number of women not back in the workplace right now because they can't get back on their feet. Those jobs are not available. Childcare is not available. They simply can't afford to go to work. And once we start getting those things underway and getting people with good jobs and they can afford and they have that little bit extra, they're going to spend it back in the economy. It's going to take years, but we have to start now. We can't just keep putting Band-Aid fixes on and taxing people more that can hardly get by now. Property tax has gone up multiple times in the last few years, and people are still struggling. So we absolutely have multiple steps that we have to do to get this economy back on track, but it starts with getting people in good paying jobs and having the wealthiest pay their fair share so we can get that money back into this economy.
Did the NDP candidate just say to not tax people more? Am I awake? Sorry.
So throughout this pandemic, of course, spending has been required to make sure that Canadians got through, that there was food on the table. And the alternative to that, frankly, would really have been what I would equate to a Great Depression. That is the scale at which I think we could have seen our future. I'm an economist by study, and I strongly believe that our Liberal government has been there for us and made smart financial decisions and investments in us as Canadians, as individuals, and as businesses. It was spending that was necessary in order to help foster the recovery that we are starting to see now. And we've seen 92% of the jobs that were lost during COVID-19 have been recovered. This outpaces the United States, who's only at 75%. So we know that we have a plan and a platform that is costed, that has achievable goals over the next 5 years, a 5-year planning cycle, which is a commitment that a government could make versus a 10-year plan. And we're investing in Canadians, and we will see our economy rebound because we're investing strategically.
So the unfortunate thing is I haven't heard anything yet about a green economy or recovering greater than where we were before the COVID pandemic started. This is an opportunity, and it's unfortunate that nobody else seems to be seeing this. We can create jobs, and we can grow our economy by starting to transition to a green economy, by retrofitting buildings across the country. There's many homes, there's many buildings, or many office buildings that do need to be retrofitted. And from that, jobs will come. We also need to retrofit the electric grid or the electric grid, pardon me, across the country. So there is an opportunity here for us to become a better, more compassionate country, because we keep hearing about how the support offered by the Liberal government helped everybody. Well, I don't know. I think for people who are disabled who might be listening in, yeah, they had to get by on $1,200 a month maximum, while other people who were not disabled, who qualified for CERB, got $2,000. It's, again, grossly unfair, and it was harmful to people's mental health. If we're truly a compassionate society, we can grow back better, green our economy, green our electrical grid, move forward on climate emergency, but take everyone along. Don't leave anyone behind.
I think part of that too is making sure that as Canadians that we build our industry. If we can produce it in Canada, why aren't we buying it from Canadians? Why aren't we buying it from Canada? Why are we looking elsewhere? The more that we can buy Canadian made, the more we can have those good jobs up and running as soon as possible instead of importing from other countries.
Here, here. I'm
All
all
right,
for that.
that's time. Yes. Scott Miller, I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
The government's economic growth, last I saw, was minus 1.2%. That is growth in the wrong direction. The economic plan has been a complete shit show from day one. The Prime Minister now has lots of good ideas. The current plan is Oprah right now. You can have $1 billion, you can have $1 billion, you can have $1 billion. Throwing money around, where it's going to come from, we have absolutely no idea. I would push for an audit for every single one of those $1 billion that's gone. I'd love to know where it is, because we have a very tough economic road ahead of us.
That's time. Thank you. Next question is for Jennifer McAndrew, the Conservative candidate. Your leader has talked about treating drug addiction like a health issue rather than a crime. Why not go one step further and decriminalize drug possession?
Well, thank you so much. I think what we're looking for and what we found, and it's great that we're addressing the issues of addiction and mental health tied into that, and the challenges that face, until we're able to support the individuals who have these addictions. You know, it's scary how prevalent this is in our communities, especially in Kanata North and Stittsville area. I know that's not our riding, but as part of the Dave Smith Youth Treatment Center, we're seeing an abundance of drug use. You know, we don't want to put a stigma on it. We want people to get health. We know that this is tied into their mental health, and it's scary that it's so accessible to our youth, to our families, and we're seeing more and more of it in our community. And I think that the first step is to make it to not criminalize that part of it.
Okay, it's open to everyone on this topic. Go ahead.
The one good thing this government did was legalize marijuana, which was something they promised to do, and there's nothing wrong with that. The list of negative effects is nil. It was a good idea to do. I know various people have promoted decriminalization and treated it as a health issue. That seems like a pretty reasonable approach. It certainly worked with pot. There are far more potent drugs, but criminalizing is probably not the answer. It's not working very well, so we should try something else.
I agree with Scott, and I'd also like to commend Mr. O'Toole on getting as far as he's got and taking this issue to the point where treating it as a health issue and not as a crime. That's fantastic and a significant improvement from the previous positions of the Conservative Party. Now, it would be really nice if the Liberals would get that far as well, because while they have suggested that they might see it as a health issue, they've been too scared as being labeled as being soft on crime and that sort of thing to take any real action, even though there's been a variety of different public health officers across the country begging the Liberal Party and Mr. Trudeau to treat it as a health issue and to decriminalize. It's sad, but again, politics over lives, and thousands of people have died with this opioid crisis. I think it's time for a new approach, as Scott said. Obviously, the current approach has not been working. So decriminalization and offering a safe supply, offering treatment, like the resources that normally go towards policing can therefore go towards treatment for those who are ready. For those who aren't ready, you have safe injection sites, you have a safe supply, because they're going to find it anywhere, anyways, oftentimes if the addiction is strong. And right now, it's an unsafe supply, and it's killing Canadians from all walks of life and all socioeconomic backgrounds.
I think further to that, I think a big part of the problem with the opioid crisis and drug addictions is the lack of treatment, the lack of funds for treatment. Most treatment centers you have to pay for. People can't afford it. They are hard to find. They are harder to find in this city. And I think that that is really not the way to go when you want to treat something, when you want to treat an addiction. We need to have centers set up. We need to fund this so that people can get the help that they need. They need education. We also need to look at really where are people have legal drug addictions as well, and where is the responsibility of the drug companies for some of these drugs and getting them out there so easily. And we need to have an investigation into that, and we need to really focus on decriminalizing the addictive parts that people are struggling with, because just like any other addiction where you can go into a hospital and get treatment, drug addictions and coming off of drug addiction and the rehab from it takes a lot of time. And yes, it is expensive, but it is worth the investment for every single Canadian to have that available to them for when they are ready to seek that treatment. Because now we get people that come into the hospital ready for treatment, and there really is nowhere for them to go because they can't afford it.
So what I think what we need is actually a mental health strategy, overarching mental health strategy, along with significant increases, not just for mental health, but for everything else that's been underfunded by the federal government, but significant increases in the Canada Health transfers, because addiction is a mental health issue, and also it's comorbid, which oftentimes addiction will occur along with depression, along with anxiety, along with other mental health issues. So if we treat it not in a patchwork fashion, but as a whole, have a mental health strategy, increase the payments to the provinces so that they can offer psychotherapy and that sort of thing, as well as pharmacare will also help, because medications can be completely appropriate for this, then we will be moving the needle that much further and progressing as a society and as a compassionate one as well, and saving lives.
And our Liberal government has done a great job, in my opinion, over the last number of years of decriminalizing cannabis, as was mentioned. And I know that work is underway and working with the provinces with respect to opioids as well. I know in my community in Kanata-Carleton, we've been hard hit over the last 5 years with respect to opioid overdoses. And I also would concur that it often goes hand in hand with mental health concerns. And mental health is health. And our Liberal government is committed to ensuring that funding is increased and that services are accessible for those who need them when it comes to mental health and crisis. And they've worked with the provinces to be able to put forward this plan.
So I heard I think it was within the last year or last 2 years, that the Liberals were increasing their mental health funding to a variety of different provinces, possibly all of them, including Ontario. And yet I still haven't seen a patient who said, I was able to see a psychologist and it was covered. If they don't have their own insurance, or if they don't have $250 per hour, and it's usually more than one session, then they don't have that coverage that they need. So the Liberals, once again, all talk, no game.
Okay, Jennifer McAndrew, you get the final 30 seconds on this. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I am so proud that our Conservative plan is addressing these issues. We are putting money into addiction and to mental health because this is what our community needs right now. I have too many personal experiences. I have friends who have lost children because of the opioid crisis, and it hits really close to home. That shouldn't be happening. The system should not fail them, and the Conservatives, we have a plan, and we're going to do something about it, because no one needs to lose their 17-year-old son to a heroin overdose. That's not what people need. They need help. They need mental health help.
Okay. Thank you, candidates. Next question is for Jennifer Purdy, the Green Party candidate. What would you and your party do to make housing more affordable in our community and across Canada?
Right, so this is a significant issue that is affecting many people, especially millennials, and also people who end up unhoused because they don't have the money to remain in housing. Unfortunately, the federal government has actually in fact contributed to what we are seeing in terms of housing. Houses in Beaverbrook are now going for over $1 million, and it's grossly, yes, it's way too much. So what the Green Party would do to enable housing is we would be working with the CMHC to offer more benefits and support for organizations that want to build co-op housing, because there used to be more encouragement for co-op housing and other forms of housing for either low-income people. Oh, sorry.
It's okay. I mean, you can keep going because it's open to everyone now.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, so co-op housing used to be more encouraged up until the 70s, and so we need to have more funding going into housing, but we also need to take concrete steps so that the cost of houses no longer increases like it has been in the last year. It's been wildfire, and basically it's only if millennials and somebody who wants to buy a house, if they can go to the bank of mom and dad, then they can afford it. That's not right. We need to do much more about that.
So our Liberal Party does have a concrete plan when it comes to housing affordability. And it's a plan that will help people save for their down payment and will also build more houses and protect the rights of home buyers. There's 3 critical points to this plan, and the first being unlocking home ownership for first-time buyers and for renters who need to be able to have that assistance to save for a down payment faster, but also reducing the monthly costs of mortgages by doubling the homeowner's tax credit so that we help Canadians buy their first home sooner. The second part of that plan is building houses faster. So working to build and preserve our housing stock and repair 1.4 million homes over the course of the next 4 years to increase that supply so we can fix that supply and demand equilibrium. And lastly, I would point out, we will also protect home buyers' rights by creating a home buyers bill that will give you your Bill of Rights, that will make the process more transparent, more cost-effective, and will make it an open process for home buyers to be able to get into the housing market.
The root cause of the price of housing is that in 2008 we went to emergency interest rates. Because of the great financial crisis, we have to go to sub 1% interest rates, which makes money free, not just for governments, but nearly free for individuals. So there's no penalty to borrow $500,000 or $1.5 million. It doesn't matter, because you can borrow it costs you next to nothing. And that's been behind most of the raise in prices. The problem with that is now, if those rates were to go back to non-emergency levels, it instantly detonate both public and private debt, because everybody who paid $1 million for the house, suddenly you can't get that free money. Now your house is only worth $500,000. You're sunk.
So what I'm hearing from the other parties really isn't going to have the impact that people need right now. The NDP has committed to a 20% foreign buyers tax that will stabilize the housing market and stop it from increasing. They've also committed to bringing back a 30-year mortgage so that people's mortgage payments month over month are affordable, and try to get them closer to that 30% of their income, because so many people are paying over 30% of their income. We're also going to give $5,000 to renters to help them pay back rent and future rent to get back on their feet, because as we know, the rental market is skyrocketed just like the housing market. I think that we also need to look at building new affordable housing. We have committed to 500,000 units of affordable and co-op housing, and affordable housing has been defined as less than 30% of your income. And I think that we need to keep that in mind, because if you think of 30% of your income while you're not working, that's not very much. We need co-op housing, we need affordable rental units, and we need to stop the rent evictions and people from being kicked out of their homes in the middle of this crisis because they simply can't afford to pay their rent. It is really unfortunate that landlords are able to do this at a time when we're in complete crisis and people have nowhere to go. Because how are you supposed to come up with first and last month's rent at $1,800 a month when your income is only $2,000 a month? It is not possible. We are not back on our feet, and this is not helping. We need immediate action, and that is what the NDP is offering, is immediate action to get people into healthy, stable homes.
And I think further to that, I think what we need to look at, of course, as supply and demand issues that we're facing, and the challenge and the time frame it takes to build the homes that we're offering to put up, we need to put money into our trades to encourage people to go into the trades so that we have the ability to have people to build the homes. We need to look at cutting back red tape in the various municipalities so that these deals can be done quicker, so we can get people into homes as they need to. But I think a big thing is the supply and demand. Right now, we just don't have the supply that's being demanded of our, and we need to fix that here.
Melissa touched on a very important point, actually, is foreign ownership. We know dirty money into Vancouver some years ago was a big part of the problem, but we really have no idea how big a problem it is, because ownership of real estate can be hidden behind through shell buyers and through corporations. Transparency is the key to be able to find out who owns what, right down to resolve to an individual, to find out how big a problem foreign ownership is a really important first step. And that's something that we can get, that I believe can be done at the federal level.
Absolutely, and the Conservative plan has that in place because we're seeing empty homes in cities like that because they have been bought by foreign investors where they're putting their money here in Canada, and that's not right.
First step is to shine a light on it and see what's happening.
Okay, let's go back to Jennifer Purdy. You've got 30 seconds to wrap up on this topic.
So I actually saw a TikTok video of a woman here in Ottawa who had experienced domestic abuse with sexual assault, and she didn't qualify for emergency housing, so she was having to couch surf. So there is a serious issue for people looking for housing on a permanent, but also even on a temporary emergency basis. And this is the other thing, the Liberal government has clearly been underfunding cities as well in order to provide emergency housing. Vacant homes are an issue. It's not just about foreign ownership, and we also need guaranteed livable income to support homeowners and renters.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and in this case, we're not going to have a debate. We're just going to give each of the candidates 1 minute to answer that question. And the question is, within a couple of years, Kanata will be one of the only parts of the community that doesn't have light rail going to it. So what specific steps would you take to bring light rail to Kanata, and how soon? Melissa Coenraad, we'll start with you.
That is a very good question. That is something that we're hearing a lot about at the door, and I think that it is imperative that the light rail in Ottawa goes all the way into Kanata and beyond. We need to be able to connect our outer parts of Ottawa also into the city, and the NDP government has committed to funding light rail and public transit, green public transit in cities, and working with the municipalities to make sure that they have good contracts to have that light rail built in a very timely manner. And I think that we need to make sure that the light rail we have coming all the way out to Kanata to service Kanata is reliable, and that it will run well in all of our weather conditions, because Canada goes from extremes of +40 to -40, and the current system we have needs to be improved upon, and that's something that I'm absolutely willing to advocate for and work on for the members of Kanata-Carleton.
All right, don't remind us about the -40. It's still summer, technically. Okay, Jenna Sudds, you're next. You have 1 minute.
Sure, thank you. So over the last almost 10 years, it's fair to say that I've been advocating for a light rail throughout our city and to serve Kanata. In the last 3 years, in my capacity as city councillor, of course, I have been pushing for Stage 3 to come to Kanata and been involved in those discussions. Stage 2 will get us to Moody Drive 2025. So we need to be ready. We need to have shovels ready in the ground to keep building, to connect to the rest of Kanata. We know that we need the federal government, of course, and our provincial government counterpart to come to the table to help fund this. And I am sure that we'll be able to do so in the years to come. I think it's also important to note that our light rail will go through Kanata and towards Stittsville, but we need to make sure that we connect the largest technology park in Kanata and the second largest employment hub in our city as well, with clean transportation.
Thank you. Scott Miller, you're next. You have 1 minute.
So I recall in 2019, the same debates, the other candidates were all talking about light rail, and what I said was, we don't need to move people down to their jobs, we need to move the jobs to the people. So one of the real benefits we've had of this pandemic is we've had to make the leap into telework. It's worked for hundreds, thousands, millions of people are now able to effectively do their job in their homes or close to homes. And that by far that has a much bigger green impact on the environment and a much better impact on people's lives. You're not spending your hours in a metal box going from place to place. We've made 10 years of progress in telework. We had to do it in 6 months, maybe 9 months, but we did. And I hope that's something that sticks. Because now people know they can work. If we manage it effectively, people can work from anywhere in the world, practically speaking, if you've got decent internet, which we don't in the rural parts of Canada. It's still terrible. That needs to be addressed. But we can fix that.
All right, thank you. Jennifer McAndrew, you're next. You have 1 minute as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think it's great to know that today Aaron O'Toole announced as part of his infrastructure plan that his priority was to have light rail come through Kanata with the LRT. They want to get shovels in ground as quickly as possible. We need to get people not only to Kanata to enjoy the things that we have out here, to create jobs, keep youth, working at the CTC so that they have those experiences, but we also need to get people downtown. And I think that a Conservative government prioritizing this speaks to how important it is to the people in the riding. It makes things easier, and we can't forget the rural areas that we have, because they often, getting out to Dunrobin, to Carp, those areas need to be addressed, but having the facilities to do that in Kanata-Carleton is going to be beneficial for all of us. And again, we have some great, I commuted to Kanata North quite a bit, and the traffic there, so I think things like this will really help as we go back to what will be our new normal in the future, and I look forward to the support we have from the Conservative government doing this for our riding.
Okay, thank you. Jennifer Purdy?
Yes, so the impact of the federal government for the LRT is somewhat limited because of jurisdictional issues. However, the best thing that the federal government can do is to provide funding. So obviously, if I was elected, I would be looking for funding and doing whatever I needed to do to get that funding to get this going. I do think it's important, hopefully, although again, because jurisdictional issues, the federal government would not have a say in this, but hopefully next time the technical specifications for the bidding process will be respected, and they won't be voted over by City Council, as unfortunately occurred last time. And we've seen so many issues with LRT simply because it appears that appropriate processes were not always followed. I agree with Scott, though. We're kind of talking about Kanata-Carleton as a whole. However, and LRT is so important, but for many people on the outskirts of Kinburn, Constance Bay, I live in Dunrobin, Carp, LRT is not the only answer. We also need to have better broadband, because right now, rurally, it's a disgrace.
Okay. Thank you for your answers to that question. We're going to move right to closing statements now as we wrap up our debate in Kanata-Carleton, and we're going to do the closing statements in the reverse order of the opening statements, which means we're going to start with the Green Party candidate. Jennifer Purdy, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, first of all, for tuning into this debate. Climate change, which is strange we did not even discuss tonight, but it is actually severely impacting our lives already, from air quality to heat waves to the cost of food. We have reason to be hopeful, but we need to see determination, ethics, hard work, and teamwork from everyone elected to the House of Commons. The hyperpartisanship that we've been seeing has been crippling the government, and the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP all hold responsibility. One of the parties will form government, and MPs from other parties, including Green, must help the government to succeed on our key issues, which are climate change, but also the social issues, some of which we have discussed tonight. Unlike every other candidate here, I'm not told how to vote by anyone except for Kanata-Carleton constituents. I can also speak freely, and I'm not muzzled by my party, unlike those from the Liberals, Conservatives, or NDP. So, vote Green.
Thank you. Next up is the Conservative Party candidate, Jennifer McAndrew. Go ahead, you've got 1 minute.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. Canada's Conservatives, we have a plan that will secure the future for Kanata-Carleton. From the largest technology parks in Canada to our farms west of the city and the small businesses in every corner of our community from Carp to Constance Bay. Our Canada's Recovery Plan will get the economy back on track. Our plan will restore accountability and trust in our government. It will address the mental health epidemic, ensure we're ready for the next health crisis, and we will get Canada's fiscal house in order. I am thrilled to be the Conservative candidate for Kanata-Carleton. I have deep roots in our community. I grew up in Beaverbrook. I bought my first house in Glencairn. I raised my kids in Morgan's Grant, and now my family is living in Carp. I'm a respected small business owner, a dedicated community volunteer, and a proven leader. I am ready to be a strong and passionate member of Parliament. Canada's Conservatives are the only choice to secure the future. Let's get to work. My name is Jenna for McAndrew, and I hope I can count on your support.
Thank you. Next up, Scott Miller from the People's Party of Canada. Go ahead.
The PPC was founded on liberty, freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. We are a party, we out-liberal the liberals with our adherence to classic liberal values of freedom of speech, freedom of association, basically freedom of the individual. Those are what we call classic liberal values. We out-conservative the conservatives with emphasis on small government, limited government, and financial common sense. I would say we out-green the Greens, or at least I do, with the emphasis on telecommuting as practical, limited, rational, practical measures to improve the world in the short term and the long term. But I think the biggest issue this election is lockdowns. We are absolutely dead set against lockdowns. No government has a right to declare your business non-essential, that you are non-essential, your kid's education is non-essential. That is a line that we have crossed and we must not cross. And vote PPC for freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is the Liberal Party candidate, Jenna Sudds. Go ahead.
Thank you. We have a decision to make, and we can't move backwards. The decisions that we make now as we work to get out of this pandemic are critical to our future. We need a Liberal government elected to continue to fight the fight against COVID. We need to provide stronger health care for everyone, including mental health and support for our seniors, provide better housing and safeguards for buyers, introduce $10 childcare so more women can participate in the economy. And we need to continue our fight against climate change and creating jobs. Our friends and neighbors in the rural parts of Kanata-Carleton need better internet connectivity. I will leverage my experience as an economist, a mother, a community builder, and a trailblazer to help shape the future of our community and our country. So let's keep building Kanata-Carleton together.
Thank you. Finally, the closing statement from Melissa Coenraad of the NDP. Go ahead.
Thank you. When you elect a member of parliament, you're electing someone to be your voice in government. When you bring an issue forward, you want an MP that is available, accessible, and will boldly bring your concerns into that government house. My experience as a union president has prepared me to do that for you. My experience in negotiations and mediation has readied me to represent the constituents of Kanata-Carleton. I want to leave you with 3 thoughts today. First, the NDP will make life more affordable for Canadians with affordable housing, less than 30% of your income, affordable childcare at $10, internet, and pharmacare. We will fight for you instead of the billion-dollar companies. And we are the only party with the courage to do what it takes to bring us out of this pandemic.
All right, thank you. Thank you, candidates, for a very polite and respectful debate. I appreciate it. Good luck to all of you. A reminder that Election Day is September the 20th. Thank you for joining us on the local campaign.